Now let's look at the venous structures below the diaphragm. And as we've seen before, the diaphragm is one of our familiar landmarks that's going to separate the thoracic from the abdominopelvic cavities. So when we look at the venous structure below, the first thing we're going to think of is the inferior vena cava in the human, the posterior vena cava in the cat, sometimes just called the post cava in the cat. And that is the part of the vena cava, the part of the venous system that's going to empty into the right atrium that is below the heart. So any of the great vessel of the vena cava below the heart is the inferior vena cava, and it's going to ascend up through the diaphragm to empty into the right atrium. Now, one of the first veins we're going to look at that is on your sheet is a bit different in the cat from what it is in the human. So we have something called the adrenolumbar vein in the cat because both the adrenal and the lumbar veins will come off of it. In the human, we're going to have a vein called the suprarenal vein. And on the right-hand side here, that would be this vein, and it drains directly into the inferior vena cava, and it is going to be draining the adrenal gland. And in the human, we call the adrenal gland sometimes the suprarenal gland because it's sitting right on top of the kidney. Now, in the cat, you'll notice that they're separate. The adrenal gland is not directly sitting on top of the kidney. It's near it, but it's not directly sitting on top of it. So for now, what I'm going to do is I'm going to hide the diaphragm so that we can look at these structures a little bit more clearly. And we can see that the suprarenal vein on the right-hand side is going to drain the adrenal gland, and it's going to drain directly into the inferior vena cava. Now on the left-hand side, we have a slightly different arrangement. We have our adrenal gland up here, and our suprarenal vein is going to drain into the left renal vein. So as we've seen before, the renal veins course right along with the renal arteries. So in the human, as in the cat, we'll see that basically the renal veins are sitting right on top of the renal arteries, and they're going to drain the circulation from the kidney into the inferior vena cava. And we see that's true on the right-hand side as well. We have our renal vein and we have our renal artery, and they course right along together. The difference here is that in the human, the suprarenal vein is going to drain the adrenal gland directly into the inferior vena cava, and on the left-hand side, the suprarenal vein is going to drain into the left renal vein. So now we've covered not only the adrenolumbar veins, or the equivalent, sort of the equivalent in human, but we've also covered the renal veins, which are the next ones on our sheet. So then we can look at the left and right iliolumbar veins. Now, as in the arteries in the cat, they're going to drain into the inferior vena cava, into the lower portion of the inferior vena cava, or what in the cat would be the posterior vena cava. In the human, our adrenolumbar veins are going to drain into the internal iliac vein. So that's the difference again between the cat and the human. The human adrenolumbar vein is going to drain into the internal iliac vein, whereas in the cat it's going to drain into the caudal part of the post cava. Now what I'm going to do is hide part of the arterial system. So I'm going to hide the descending abdominal aorta, and I'm going to hide some of these other branches of it here, including the inferior mesenteric. And this will give us a better view of the venous structures. So I'm going to hide the internal iliac artery and the external iliac artery here. So I've hidden most of the arterial structures here so that we can get a better look at the venous structures. So when we look at what happens in the pelvic region, we've got the bifurcation of the inferior vena cava. We have got the common iliac vein on either side. So we've got a right common and left common iliac vein. And we will have an internal iliac vein that drains into it on both sides. So we have a right and left internal iliac vein. So in the human, this pattern very much mirrors what we see with the arterial system. But in the cat, This is very much what we see in the human, so it's very similar in cat and human, but we see the big difference between the arterial system in the cat and the human. But now that we're looking at the venous structures, once again, we're looking at the inferior vena cava in the human or the post cava in the cat, we see that we have common iliac veins on both sides. And we have the internal iliac veins draining into them, and we have the external iliac veins that join them so that the external iliac vein is really continuous with the common iliac vein. And of course, in the leg, the femoral vein is going to course right alongside the femoral artery. So the femoral vein will be bringing venous blood back up to the heart via first the femoral vein, then the external iliac vein, the common iliac vein, and of course the internal iliac vein will be draining into the common iliac vein as well. And those will fuse from both sides into the inferior vena cava. So this is the structure of our venous system that will drain the abdominopelvic region and the legs. Now there's one other vein that we should look at, and that is the hepatic portal vein. And I'm going to have to zoom in on it from here. And what we'll see is that in the cat, if we happen to have a cat that has the latex, the yellow latex injection, which shows the hepatic portal system, we'll see the hepatic portal vein show up very nicely. And as you probably recall, that a portal system is where you have one capillary bed draining directly into another capillary bed. So it doesn't go directly back into venous circulation, but one capillary bed drains into another capillary bed. So in the endocrine system, in the hypophyseal portal system, we could see that the pituitary gland received the hormones that were produced from the hypothalamus directly before those hypothalamic hormones could enter into circulation. So they went directly from the hypothalamus to the pituitary. In this case, with the hepatic portal system, we will be sending nutrients from the digestive organs, the stomach, the intestines, the spleen, directly to the liver before they go back into general circulation. So this is going to be the hepatic portal vein, and that's going to join a lot of the venous structures from the digestive organs to the liver. And as we'll see when we study digestion, the liver will be sort of a filtration system and a nutrient storage area and warehouse. So before these nutrients enter into general circulation, they will first enter into the liver. So that is what the hepatic portal vein does. And we can see it in the cat very nicely because you can see it coming straight off of the digestive organs, the stomach and the small intestine, for example. And you can see how it goes straight up to the liver. And in some cats, this is going to be dyed yellow. In other cats where we did not have the hepatic portal system being injected with the yellow latex, it's going to end up being a dark brown color. And that is the hepatic portal vein. And those are the venous structures that we need to know below the diaphragm.